Hello, bit of a quick one today. So we've got some new restrictions that came out. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect the standard style of game. So thanks a lot for ruining worlds for D format. So we're gonna have Bafsalga everywhere, unfortunately, and it's not gonna be great. I'm not looking forward to worlds anymore. But there is a downside for premium players as well, which I'll get to later. Now, D format, sorry, premium format, because apparently that's all they care to restrict today. So they've choice restricted Luard and Nice. This is actually the V version of Luard, not the D or the G version, whatever. It's not that version. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it affects the G version. I'm not sure how this works exactly, but this is the illustration they've chosen to use. So I do think it's the English version of the game that came up with the restriction list. I think Japan probably just gave up and just let them do whatever, which would probably explain why we didn't get a standard hit, maybe, as well. But also would explain why we didn't get an errata change with how they work, making it similar to energy generators where you put them in your ride deck, because they're basically treated like tokens, sort of, the crests in the stride deck sets. So had they changed that, they could have avoided putting like multiple restrictions in one restriction list. They could have just done it like that, and then that just naturally kills them. Then another restriction they did was Reverence Rush Dragon. So this is a card that should have never existed. It's a pointless card, doesn't add any value or fun entertainment to the game whatsoever. It's just like, oh cool, I get to put a heal grade 3 on top of my deck, and that's it. And this is the thing with Keto, is that they made a lot of toolbox cards during this format, or during D era, and honestly there's a lot of issues with D when it comes to how it affects premium, because V format, a lot of V cards were kind of designed to kind of push finishes and things, and make games a lot more kind of make it so that a lot of clans had some sort of way of pushing for a win. But when we went to D, then we started seeing a lot of clans getting nerfed and destroyed, basically, and only some clans could actually sort of keep up. But not even just some clans, actually, very specific variations of decks, which is also, I would say, the reason why crests have become very popular, is because sometimes in games you just struggle to do any pressure, and the crests are the only thing that can really kind of reliably break through things. But it's such a bad gameplay experience, because what that means is that you're relying on running a specific grade 1, you're relying so much on your cyclers just so you can have your plus 20 to front row, whatever. So there's a lot of issues with it, with the way the game is at the moment, where you could actually build a very defensive deck, but not only just healing down, using a side card, not a boss card like Wakahirome or Raphael Mitra, but you're using a random common grade 3 that you just call onto Rearguard Circle, which is a lot less resource intensive. And you've also got Fenrir. So Fenrir is a very store heavy deck with the V format version because of Vratram. Vratram is a mistake of a card. And what they did was you use 2 CB every turn. Obviously, you can use Claim Harry to counter charge, but Claim Harry, you can retire it. You can play a card that retires it. It's not the biggest deal, that card. The bigger deal is Reverence Rush Dragon, because you're healing down on top of all that, so you're making it even easier to take damage, and then you just get fresh blood and counter boss all over again. And you just keep the game going on forever. You have Anavata, so if your opponent uses restanders, -2 crit on anything that's important, and just keep the game going, and you just go overtime, because your opponent maybe happens to play around Melissa. So it's really good that they banned this. I don't think anyone should miss it. It's not an expensive or high value card or anything, so just get rid of it. It never belonged to any decks anyway in the first place. It's just a broken common that people just use to basically take the game in a direction which the game wasn't supposed to really be played. And then Shiranui, choice restrict with Seizui. So Seizui and Oboro were always going to probably get some sort of nerf, because Shiranui is, I think, the most topping deck in this season as well, if I'm not mistaken. Or if not, one of the most topping decks. It's very well-rounded. A lot of decks can't really play the game reliably anymore, but Shiranui has kind of aged okay compared to most decks at the moment when it comes to just being rounded and having some sort of answer to everything. And it's also a protect farm deck, which makes it even much more scarier. But they've got grade 2s that restand as well, which makes it more aggro. They've got history collection on top of all that, so not only doing their crest thing, but they can also go history collection. And they've got Cycler, which not only can use it to discard and search for the grade 1, but it's a very good card in general, because you're forcing your opponent to discard. So what you do is you stride, and your opponent's now discard at least 2 cards from the hand during that turn. So it's very aggressive, which means your opponent goes to high damage more easily, even with the grade 2 restands, if you want to do the grade 2 restands. And that puts you in lethal range for something like Sukamura-kan or Rine especially. It's much harder now to guard against Nubatam than it's ever been. And then going on to the next thing, Alter Ego Messiah is the same crest restrict again. Then we've got Jet and Harry, which are the stronger decks, I would say. Jet, really annoying. If they high roll you and you do your 1 turn 3 play, and let's just say you're susceptible to Tetra Round Dragon, then that's it, your whole turn got ruined, and now they just go turn 4 OTK you. done. It's a very high roll deck. Harry's kind of similar. It's a very dangerous high roll deck as well, where on turn 4 they're pretty much going to win either way. And they do something similar to Heteround, where they can play cards that can call cards from Soul during guarding. So they would basically G-Guard and bring... I can't remember which G-Guard it was, but they Superior Call and they get the grade 3 that does column retire, which can play around resist by soul charging a trigger. Now, there is a downside to soul charging trigger if you're playing that variant, because this is different to the Tricky Assistant one, which you can play Tricky Assistant as well, but there's but Tricky Assistant can't counter resist cards or anything similar to it. But the grade 3 column retire can counter almost anything. And the thing is with that is that you do have to soul charge a trigger from your hand, so sometimes that can also be a double-edged sword, because you're only playing like I think 8 triggers that you want to keep in hand. So you got heals, you got draw PGs. So getting rid of one of those kind of hurts. But if you've got crits, that's an easy one to soul charge. And then you've got the stand trigger as well, which you could also soul charge as well. So there's not as many cards you can target really that would be easy to soul charge without being a downside. So it can be quite situational if it ends up hurting you back at the same time. Then going into the next thing, so we've got Gran Blue, choice restrict between Night Rose and Parting Shade. Another one of these restricts, but this is actually quite impactful because crests are obviously a 3+1, which means it's harder to pressure them down. But at the same time, it also makes all those subtle, small attacks on turn 3 a lot stronger. So if they get an extra 5k, that can make a big difference, and that stops you from keeping your damage lower. Keeping your damage low is quite important, because what that means is that when you're on lower damage, you can then counter Bartholomew, because then Skull Dragon by the time will be massive when they get 30 cards and drop, and Guard Restrict on top of that. Oh, sorry, Battledore skill even. When you PG, it's a 4-card drop, and that's obviously going to be very taxing in your hand. So this is really this is a really big deal, and obviously you have to drop too much a guard that can affect your aggression, because then you're dropping combo pieces, which can help facilitate more aggro. So then what it turns into, and this is unfortunately how I've had to play against Gran Blue this season a lot, because I've had a game on average every event I've been to where I would go overtime against Gran Blue, because what happens is they go first, which is already bad, but then not only do they go first, my hand ends up being a mess for some reason. It could be something like Seer Yggdrasil not being in my hand to do the pressure plays. It could be something like, for example, another one I've had is not having defensive cards, so I had to damage deny Gran Blue and slow the game down. And then I realized within 3 turns that the only way I can beat Gran Blue most likely is if I deck them out, and then the game just takes too long. So that's what's been happening basically this season. A lot of times is that I've been trying to deck out Gran Blue players because something went wrong on my turn 3 and I went second. And this is kind of at least comforting, although this only affected like one of my games this season. So, but it's kind of like, it's sort of like an extra layer of reducing the chance of that being a problem. I do think Gran Blue is something that should be on the watch list because of other reasons we'll get into soon. But Gran Blue has always been a dominating clan, which has always been gatekept because of Meg Colony, because of Gredora. So that's kind of the main bad matchup it has. But Gran Blue is just a really, really good clan. It's got everything going correctly. Otherwise, in Largolf, so in Largolf is also getting banned. So this card is basically like a Greed Shade, but without CB cost, which is easier to manage in Gran Blue. But you can't add Sanctuary to your hand. So I find that really annoying adding Sanctuary, because it means OTT can never win against Gran Blue. And in Largolf, what it does as well is you're adding grade 3 heal, so you can get more G-Guards, use Cannoneer, keep hand trapping your opponent, or you can use the minus crit if it's late game as well, to weaken your opponent's rear guards, and even Vanguard I think it affects as well, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember that bit, but the other thing as well is that in Neo Nectar, you can Superior Call it to add heals to hand. So on top of doing Rosaria Fairy, which can call 2 tokens, on top of doing something like Lilgo, which can bounce a bunch of PGs to hand. So you're farming defense while aggroing your opponent at the same time to a fair extent. Because Lilgo traditionally has always had this thing where if you use Lilgo Katrina, you're basically nerfing Katrina, which kept it balanced. But because of Rosario Fairy, you're now actually doing 2 tokens. So I feel like really, and I'm going to be a bit. I do think if you banned Katrina, that would be a little bit extreme. I think they could have. There's a lot of other things they could have considered, possibly. But in Largolf also is good in Gredora as well. You can Spirit Call because it's grade 3 as well. So you can add G-Guards to hand while your opponent can't G-Guard. Then next you've got Genesis. A lot of restrictions for Genesis, but you know what? They changed the time rules to make it so that if you go 35 minutes, it's double loss. But that was not good enough because people were still playing Fenrir. And not just Fenrir, people were playing Gran Blue, which turns into a deck out game sometimes. And decking out is a problem in this game right now. Game's taking too long because there's been too many defensive players introduced to the game. Obviously, protect farming decks is one thing. Going history collection. 2, protects the hand. Having hand traps. Having minus crit G Guardians. Having V promos that also treat themselves as G Guardians, or even can be used for their own effects as well to get massive shield buffs and give 5 to Vanguard. Elementary Sanctitude can also hurt a lot of guard restricts, like Ant Line, for example, Ichikishima. Anything that has some sort of guard restricts. Sanctitude, 1 card drop, done. There's no there's no downside to using it. Your opponent goes through all that trouble just so you can drop 1 card to guard. So there's a lot of problems right now with D format because of this, I would say, and obviously that means something like Fenrir, defensive store version, can thrive in that format, but in a very obnoxious way. Because, to be honest, I still think people should not be playing Fenrir in tournaments, even under the current rules. But people are still doing it, so you can't control the market. I guess you can't control. You can't just leave it to people to kind of figure out what the appropriate deck choices are just because of an incentive structure. So you have to just outright restrict things. So that's what they end up doing. But one of these cards is not actually part of that same list, which is Gelja. We'll get into that in a bit. But Dreaming Dragon has been completely banned, and so has Witch of Frogs Melissa. Witch of Frogs Melissa is a dumb card. I mean, it's fun to use it, but the fact is you can abuse it all game. This should have had an ace skill. If we had ace skills at the time, just use it once in a game, that's it. But the problem is you can keep reusing it. Some people have been playing 1 to 2 copies, so they just add it back to hand. They can search with Fenrir, they can use Diorong, they can use Rarelim, etc. There's loads of cards that can add it back to hand, basically. Even Vine as well, you can use Vine. So it's not really, it's not good gameplay, obviously. Anything that doesn't try to push your opponent 6 damage, I think there's a lot of question mark around those decks. Like Gyze, obviously, is another one, but, if you restrict a Gyze, then you'd end up that causes, I think, a lot of problems. Like other stakeholders and pressure groups would then get a bit pissed off about it. But Melissa, I don't think, to be honest, I think a lot of people might be okay with it. It is a shame that my foil Melissas won't be played anymore, but I wasn't using them anyway. I didn't really like the playstyle. That's why I never played the deck myself. I wanted to just play the game normally. Dreaming Dragon, that's been banned just like Taro. So now all the G stands that, as in G Strider stands are banned for Genesis. It's unprecedented because we've not had this happen to any other Strider. So Rescue, they have 1 Refros, I believe. But then the other stand, the Rescue stand, is still at 4 copies. Just to kind of compare it to another example. But this is the first time we've seen it, not just an outright ban, but 2 outright bans in the same clan for a stand trigger. And both of which happen to also be for the Strider's own respective sets. So that's very unprecedented. Dreaming Dragon, I always did feel like, though, I mean, although this has kind of turned out a bit different to what I expected, because I think this was the English side that came up with it, but I did feel like there was a bit of foreshadowing that one of these days Dreaming Dragon will be let go, because when you saw Orange Witch Valencia get made, then you saw Feroris get made for D format, which you can use in Premium. Then you see Ramonis get made, which is the V promo cycler that puts a crit or draw trigger to one with your deck and activates the trigger. And then you see the V Grade 1 promo that came out not that long ago, which is the one that treats itself as a G-Guard, which returns up to 4 cards a deck. Yeah, it kind of did seem like Dreaming Dragon was on the way out. I didn't really like this card that much in the end, for Regalia at least, because when I play in Regalia, it basically keeps your defenses low for that 1 turn. And that's obviously an issue, because if your defenses are low, then your opponent has an opening if they're playing a more aggressive deck to actually kill you. But then that also just means, I'd rather just check the crit triggers and then just go full on pressure. And I prefer to just use other cards like the V promos, because ever since we got the Grade 1 V, I've not really had to think about much anymore. I just decided, I'll play 4 of these cards, get more defense in the game, and just keep returning cards to deck, even if they're not triggers, just so I can keep the game going or not die to something super aggro too early. That's actually been part of the reason why I've had some issues as well, because basically even if I brick, and let's just say even my opponent plays an aggressive deck like Spike Blows, because this did happen on my last round. I think it was a decisive round as well, because that guy got into top cut. But basically, I wasn't doing anything for like the entire game, but I was still alive. I managed to sort of just keep clinging, because my deck was very defensive as well. Just there's so many problems with defense in this game right now, which doesn't really match up with with certain things. But Dreaming Dragon being gone is a big change. But I don't think we really need it anymore. I think it kind of outlived its usefulness at this point now. It's not like Taro, where I think when Taro got banned, it basically just ruined the clan, because a lot of decks became very, very unplayable at the time, especially. But and even now we still got problems with it. lingering problems to this day, which is why a lot of people now just go for Witcher Frog's Melissa as a finisher, because they gave up on dealing 6 damage. And this is why you're seeing Angel Feathers playing Gyze, for example, rather than playing normal Angel Feathers, because they can't put pressure to finish games. So it's become less popular to deal 6 damage in some clans. Even OTT now, I think you're more likely to see some people playing Gyze variants if you do come across OTT decks, because of decks like Gran Blue running around, and protect spam as well. Adding 2 protects to hand does also make the game very difficult for those types of triple attack decks. And Gelja, last thing as well, this was not part of the hand trap combo. So Gelja, there's a whole thing where you can just do loads and loads of power, just spam the skill, basically do like sort of like a loop. Just keep reusing and rinsing skills over and over to make insane powers, basically. And obviously Taro wasn't like the sole reason why you could do loops powers in the first place. Back then I pointed out that Ordain Owl could just be used instead of Taro. But obviously if you build a deck like that, at this point in time, I mean, it is a bit better now to play that deck, but back then it wasn't really that appealing to play it, because there's too many pieces and stuff could just fall apart. But that's also something you could always play if you ever think it's optimal. You can always do that to just do an obnoxious loop. Now that's impossible because Gelja's been restricted to 1, so it's now straight up just impossible to ever do a power loop now. You don't have to think about it again. What you should be worried about is Orange Witch Valencia and over triggers, because you can play OT as a starter if you want to guarantee you never damage check it by accident or drive check by accident. And then what you do is you obviously miss out on the draw ability of the starter, but then it's similar to when people used to play Taro as a starter back in the day. And then what you do is you get to late game, Orange Witch Valencia, put OT to bomb the deck. And then, and actually that's another reason why Gelja is also quite good, is that if you're on a different boss, what you can actually do is that you can, as in you don't have the mandatory Soul Charge 2, right? What you could do is you could put a whole bunch of Gelja to bomb for your deck after you put the OT to bomb for your deck. And then you just check OT and not deck out, because OT does a mandatory draw 1 as well. So Gelja is one of the ways you can get around that problem when the OT goes off and you have to draw a card after fixing the bottom of your deck, basically. You can also play Vanguard though as your stride as well to get around that too. There's quite a few like tricks and things you can do to abuse the OT in Fenrir. Then going on to Nubatama again, Mizukaze and Sukamorokan. Now this is quite a disappointing one, to be fair, which it's really because of all the new cards that they've been making. So Nubatama's changed a lot right now. All these cards used to be quite fine back in the day. The playstyle, a bit like OTT. This is mainly designed for 3 attack decks, and that's it. They were meant to just do 3 attacks, and that's how you were able to justify these cards existing in the first place. But what they've done is they made a grade 2 that forces discard very easily. They've made also a history collection stride to basically get the guaranteed hit, so that you discard a card and you gain 2 protect gifts just to get even more defense. You're doing a lot of pressure and doing defense farming at the same time, and it's so strong because then by your turn 3 basically, you're kind of there stuck with less cards in hand to play with, or you may have had to take more damage, and that obviously causes a lot of problems with the pacing of the game. And then your opponent then gets to play around for a while because they're quite defensive, and obviously it makes the game a lot harder. Sukamorokan, Rine, they'll basically start spamming that stuff out on you. Obviously you need 2 CB2 Sukamorokan, but it's quite easy for them to conserve CB with the current lists. So you get punished pretty much for once you try to bite them back, more or less, then they can just dump the Sukamorokan on you. And then you're just playing the game with low hand. But because they can squeeze your hand to like very low amount, like maximum of 3, they not only do that, but now they've got more than 3 attacks because of the new grade 2s that came in the Stride deck set. Obviously, Mizukaze as well is there to do guard restricts. But obviously you can play around that. Well, you were always able to play around it with G Guardians. But like it's just kind of extra added stress in a way on top of what they can already do. So they're doing so much stuff now. They're discarding your hand. They are multi-attacking. And even the Strider can make you discard or guard via Dominate. So there's a lot of stuff going on which just puts a lot of strain on you, and you're most likely going to be in damage range for a lethal kill if they get the odd. I mean, they can even just win games because they double crit you very easily, but now it's a lot more scarier to deal with. And Rine obviously is a problem because if you start guarding too much, then Rine will play around you in that case instead of Sukamorokan. So you've now just outright banned Sukamorokan, which is a shame because it should not have come down to this. That's not how Nubatama was supposed to really function. They basically just changed how the clan works in a way. And those grade 2s aren't really going to be gaining much power because the crest has been banned. So I don't know how much of a nerf this has been to Nubatama, but it's definitely going to make it a lot easier to deal with Nubatama now. I mean, I'm even tempted to say Nubatama might be weaker than it was before the crest came out, but actually, maybe. I'm not sure. It could be, because I feel like the restanding multi-attacks just aren't that big of a deal anymore compared to what they used to be, because you don't have the crest. But I could be ignoring a lot of things. Dark Irregulars, we've got 2 bans. Never thought the day would come. I've always found Dark Irregulars to be very frightening, but no one was playing them in tournaments. They never make top cut. They have bad matchups, which gatekeep them basically from getting top cut. But if you go against them, I've had formats where I would basically optimize my deck against every other deck in the format, but then Dark Irregulars, nope, I have no answers to that. So for me, this is kind of convenient now that I don't have to worry about this stuff. But it could be bad news for Dark Irregulars, because I don't know if they have substitutes for this, because they are quite a go all in deck sometimes as well. NLK can farm protects, and they do have a new G guard, which is really good for minusing crits into out of turn. So maybe they can still come back. Maybe they don't need it anymore. But I think back in the day, like 3 years ago, definitely, had these been banned back then, I think Dark Irregulars would have been in a lot of trouble as a clan and faded completely into obscurity. But I think ever since around the time of History Collection, there's been a bit more kind of middle ground, I guess, to kind of have some other toys to kind of play the game and defend, I guess, for now, during around that kind of period. And going on to next set of screenshots, another choice restrict. So we've got Mazegate Dragon with Melum. I don't know why they did this one if we've already got a choice restrict for Chronojet. This one's really confusing, and I don't think it's a typo because they got the card here and the name here. So that unless someone just who wasn't really kind of questioning it just did this next part and then decided to just copy the name from there. I don't know. It's a weird one. I don't know why they decided to choice restrict with a card that's already been choice restricted with Jet, because you can only ride Jet anyway if you go into Mesa Gear. And then over here we've got Gredora, which has been completely banned, so that effect in Largolf becomes unplayable. But it also means that Gran Blue no longer has any more challenges. So Gran Blue is definitely the best deck in the format after this restriction list, no doubt. I think its worst matchup actually would be Gyze, but Gyze not having Revenant's Rush Dragon is at least something. But Angel Feathers doesn't really need it. To be fair, they've got a lot of ways they can heal and stall without Stride. And I think they've got the G Guard that can basically heal as well, the last one that they got. So this is a card, in my opinion, that should have been limited rather than banned. And even then, semi-limit, I mean, semi-limit would have been fine if we were talking about normal Meg Colony, but because of the Persona Rides Aqua Force like playstyle, the multi-attacking that should not have really been mixed into Meg Colony, I think that created a lot of problems because it meant that Gredora became too aggressive, and not just that, but because of Megalantus as well, minusing 10k, that makes a huge difference on top of all the G Guard restricts. So that was obviously too much, and I think, to be honest, Gredora at 1 would have been absolutely fine. I don't think they need to ban it. I think they went over the top, which makes me think this is the English version rather than the Japanese version, because I feel like the Japanese are lists, I mean, they're the ones who normally make the list, but they have a tendency to not really ban stuff either. Then we go to Katrina. Katrina has been banned as well. It's just straight up banned. Overkill, just like Gredora. This card has been unbanned to 4 copies, and that's just gone straight to 0. I don't know why they can't just do 1 copy, or they can't choice through with Cyclone or something, or they can't just hit Rosario Ferry. They could have done other things if they don't want to. But instead of going for like a mid-range slap, they decided to just go for a full slap in the face and just take us back to the same problem. But at least we've got the last Stride that they made, which does have multi-attack, which is okay, but I think this is really bad for Neonectar anyway, in general. And they do have the new Grade 2 that can produce tokens, I guess, but I'm not sure how good that kind of is on its own. I mean, Gladiolus wasn't really doing as much either at the time. So now, one piece of bad news is that Worlds players. So good for you, you've got your new restriction list, I guess, unless you've now got a lot of problems with your deck building, but because these are very extreme restrictions. Rather than just doing a light slap, they've actually killed some decks, which will put a lot of your testing to disarray. Which is a bit different to I think the D format, where the only thing that really got hard slap was probably Raziel, maybe. I think the Sog one hit is a bit more significant, but we're not getting that in English anyway. So But Levidras, Bafsalgra, I think those decks are going to be functioning just fine with those restrictions. They're not dead decks basically, by any means, not by a long shot, or they don't require as much testing by looks of it to actually kind of have a list finalized for Worlds in time. But the bad news is that the prize cards that they're giving out at Worlds for premium are now not going to be as popular. They might even be lower in value. So that's actually more the reason I want to play D this time around. There's a lot of factors why I decided to just stop playing BCS after a bit, but D format, giving out Akina Crest energy generators, which I predicted would happen anyway. I was like, yeah, they're going to give out Akina at Worlds, which is partly why I sold my now generator. They're giving us other bits as well. That's now a better participation prize. So there's a lot of upsides here as well. It's kind of reminding of Revival Collection or Revival Selection, I can't remember what it was called, but the one where they had like all these cards reprinted and then just banned them a week before they came out. It's the same thing again. And then Gran Blue, we've got choice restrict between Beatrice and Negro Lily. So Negro Lily is a very annoying card when you have Cannoneer in the drop zone, but Beatrice makes it so you can use Cannoneer when you're in a different boss as well. So for other Gran Blue decks in general, this is kind of a convenient thing. Beatrice will probably, I mean, you can still see play in Night Rose. Actually, no, what am I saying? Sorry, not in Night Rose. In other decks that choose not to play Cannoneer. But I think Negro Lily is probably the one that's going to suffer the most from in other lists, maybe. It's kind of a tricky one. I'm not really sure how to analyze it, but Night Rose, I think, will definitely still play Negro Lily. Beatrice will get dropped, so less multi-attacking combos as well. Which, by the way, ironically makes the Crest weaker, but the Crest has been trust restricted anyway. So there's quite a lot to unpack here. This is probably the strongest Gran Blue hit we've ever seen, for that matter. But Gran Blue is still going to be best deck as long as you play Night Rose. You can just drop Beatrice, just play one less attack, it's fine. And you've got other things now that can do pressure. And every other deck, a lot of the other good decks in the game have all been nerfed. Narukami actually, no, I would say Narukami would be a potential deck that could rise up again, but and obviously I'm not analysing this in too much detail as I'm saying. This is kind of me just saying stuff on top of my head. But Narukami could be a threat, but then you've also got Bell, which can also counter the bind zone, so maybe you might start seeing Bell get played as well again if Narukami picks up with this restriction list. Narukami, I think, is still kind of there. It's still being played. It's still getting some tops here and there. But that's pretty much it now for the restriction list. So let me know your thoughts on restriction. What would you have done differently as well? How is it affecting your prep for Worlds if you're playing at Worlds? Or how's it going to affect you for this season as well? Like, there's obviously a lot of implications that have come out of this restriction list. So I'm quite interested to see what you guys have to say. So until then, I will catch you guys later and take care now. Bye.